You are sitting in a waiting room. A man in a lab coat walks in. He asks you to do something small, something that feels wrong. You do it anyway. This has happened to you before. Maybe not in a lab, maybe not with a lab coat, but it has happened. In 1961, a psychologist at Yale wanted to know why ordinary people had committed atrocities during the Holocaust. His name was Stanley Milgram. He did not believe the answer was that those people were monsters. He suspected something far stranger. He suspected the answer was obedience itself. So, he built an experiment. A volunteer would sit at a control panel. Another person hidden behind a wall would be strapped into what looked like an electric chair. The volunteer was told to ask the hidden person questions. Every wrong answer meant a shock. Each wrong answer meant a bigger shock than the last. The hidden person was an actor. No shocks were real, but the volunteer did not know that. As the voltage climbed, the actor screamed. He begged. He pounded on the wall. Eventually, he went silent, which is somehow worse than screaming. The man in the lab coat stood beside the volunteer the entire time. He never raised his voice. He never threatened anyone. He simply said 4 sentences over and over. Please continue. The experiment requires you to continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You have no other choice. You must go on. Before running the study, Milgram asked psychiatrists to predict the results. They guessed that only 1 in 1,000 people would go all the way to the maximum shock. A sadist, an outlier, someone broken. They were wrong. 65% of participants delivered the maximum shock. 2 out of 3 ordinary people sitting in an ordinary room pushed a button they believed could kill a stranger, not because they wanted to, because a calm voice in a lab coat told them to continue. Here is the part that should unsettle you. These were not cruel people. They were teachers, engineers, postal workers. Many of them sweated. Many of them trembled. Many of them laughed nervously the way you laugh when something is too horrible to process directly. Some begged the experimenter to stop the study for them, but their hands kept moving toward the switch. Why? Your brain did not evolve in a world of individual choice. It evolved in small tribal groups where survival depended on hierarchy. If the group leader said the water was dangerous, you did not run your own analysis. You trusted him because the ones who trusted him lived, and the ones who insisted on checking for themselves sometimes did not. That instinct is still wired into you. It just wears a different uniform now. Milgram called this the agentic state. It is a mental shift where you stop seeing yourself as the author of your actions. You start seeing yourself as an instrument of someone else's will. The moment that shift happens, your sense of personal responsibility does not just weaken. Psychologically, it can feel like it disappears entirely. You can see this shift outside the laboratory. Consider Nazi officer Adolf Eichmann, one of the architects of the Holocaust logistics machine. When he was tried in Jerusalem, the philosopher Hannah Arendt expected to see a monster. Instead, she saw a bureaucrat, a man who described himself as merely following orders, merely managing paperwork, merely doing his job. Arendt called this the banality of evil, not a demon, a middle manager who never asked why. This is not ancient history. This is not a Yale basement in 1961. This lives in your Tuesday. Think about the last time your manager asked you to send an email you did not fully agree with. Think about the last time you followed a policy you privately thought was wrong because questioning it felt like more trouble than it was worth. Think about every customer service call where the person on the other end says, "I understand your frustration, but I have no ability to change this." They are not lying to you. They have entered the agentic state. The system is running through them. Later, researchers wanted to know if this obedience was really about deference to authority or something more specific to physical distance. A psychologist named Charles Sheridan ran a version of the experiment where the volunteer had to physically place the victim's hand onto a shock plate. Compliance dropped sharply. It turns out distance matters. The further you are from the consequence of your action, the easier it becomes to obey. Sit with that for a second. This is why it is easier to click approve on a decision that affects a person you will never meet than it is to say no to their face. This is why entire industries of harm can run for years, staffed by people who each individually believe they are decent. Nobody has to be evil. The system just needs enough distance between the button and the pain. There is a twist buried inside Milgram's data that almost nobody talks about. Obedience was never actually total. In every version of the study, some participants refused. Around a third of them, at some point, looked the experimenter in the eye and said no. Interestingly, the ones who refused often did so not with grand moral speeches, but with small physical acts. They stood up. They pushed the chair back. They put actual distance between themselves and the switch. That detail matters more than it seems. Refusing obedience was rarely a triumph of pure willpower happening entirely inside someone's head. It was a physical act, getting your body out of the chain of command, which means the way out of the agentic state might not be thinking harder. It might be moving. There is a modern echo of this finding in the world of aviation. After a string of accidents where co-pilots noticed a captain's fatal error but stayed silent out of deference to rank, the industry built something called crew resource management. It trains junior staff to speak up using specific scripted phrases because relying on courage alone was not saving lives. Removing the friction of speaking up did. You are right now inside systems that quietly ask you to enter the agentic state. Your job has a chain of command. Your phone has a feed that tells you what to believe is normal. Your government has departments that run on the same 4 sentences the man in the lab coat used. Please continue. It is required. It is essential. You have no other choice. You always have another choice. It is just harder to feel that in the moment than it is to describe from the outside. So here is the strange, uncomfortable inheritance sitting inside you. The same wiring that let your ancestors survive by trusting the tribe is the wiring that let ordinary postal workers deliver what they believed were lethal shocks to a stranger behind a wall. It is not a flaw that belongs to other people. Milgram did not find monsters in his lab. He found neighbors. He found the same brain you are using right now to read this sentence. Tonight, you are going to be asked to do something small that does not sit right with you. Maybe it is an email. Maybe it is a policy. Maybe it is just staying quiet in a room where you should have said something. You will feel that familiar pull toward the agentic state, the comfort of being an instrument instead of an author. The experiment never really ended. It just took off the lab coat.